Okay, everyone, thank you very much. The first session we looked at the Dutch example as sort of a test case and best practice for Europe policy in general. What we're going to do now is look at sort of another test case, and that's the current situation in Poland and how they're dealing with the implementation of the code. And then we're going to look at this as well from a few other perspectives, again, the German perspective, and then we've also have Andy Powrie-Smith, who was at the ABPI, but is now at EFPIA, so he can address things from the UK perspective as well as the EFPIA perspective, and that'll be how we end, and then we'll all have a nice networking lunch. So I'd like to begin, first off, again, with looking at the Polish perspective, and this is Romuald Krajewski, from professor of neurosurgery. He's going to discuss the medical practitioner side in Poland. So thank you, Romuald.
Obviously, I want to thank everybody for organizers for invitation, and it's a pleasure to speak about this issue. It is, of course, not first meeting. We've met in Poland before, and discussion was going on. But today I want to speak about mixed opinions of medical professionals about disclosure initiatives. And I am, as probably everybody, representing many organizations and institutions. Today I would say that I am Vice President of Warsaw Medical Chamber and President of the UEMS. This is Organization of Medical Specialists in Europe. So we can say that we have a lot of conflicts of interest, and I would also say that conflict of interest is not a problem now in such a sense that we know that everybody has it. Particularly if you see somebody standing here and speaking to you. Everybody has a problem. Our problem is bias and how to reduce the bias, because this is expressed in decisions, opinions, and practice with the patients. So, yeah, okay. Well, even closer, you mean. Yeah, okay, thank you. So, of course, all opinions are biased to some extent, and transparency is supposed to help for others, to listeners, to judge how much biased the opinions I am saying or doctor is saying to you are, how much biased they are. So today we discuss relation with medical industry and public interest in this area that is expressed by politicians and media, as it has been said here, is certainly double-faced. On one side, we have these pressures to observe regulations, ethical codes, and transparency, but at the same time, the same politicians have to take care of industry and promoting market, jobs, and so on. These are important, but I think to some extent contradictory goals, and they create a conflict of interest too. Well, such conflicts, of course, have been known since, always to medical profession, and we know very well that benefits of all kinds can strongly influence individuals and organizations. So also doctors, and the traditional response of medical profession to these problems are codes of ethics. And for example, in Poland, we have an excellent set of regulations that are supposed to direct doctors in relationship with industry and with other pressures, because I want to strongly confirm here what Bernard said earlier, that we speak about, let's say, fiscal benefits, but there are many other benefits and many other pressures that cause bias in doctors' practice. Administrative pressure is an excellent example of the let's say, situation in which we work, and which certainly has profound influence on our opinions and on our practice. So we can also say that codes of ethics, ethical regulations, are seen as insufficient to solve the problems. And of course, this is because the pressures are much higher and problems are much more frequent than it used to be when these ethical principles were formulated. So this situation, of course, reminds a little bit a battle between David and Goliath, and reportedly there were spectacular successes by David's, but most of the time Goliaths trashed David's very easily without any problem. So we, of course, would agree that transparency is certainly needed to help ethics in everyday practice, and majority of medical profession supports it. These are results of opinion poll, representative opinion poll among Polish doctors, and among other responses we got this 2/3 support for full disclosure of all benefits received from industry. So this is very good result, but there is also small, but I would say vocal opposition to such measures. These were different measures, among them disclosure. This is this row. So, of course, we can have many interesting suggestions as to what motivates this opposition. But there is one I want to stress now, and it is privacy. This is a very big issue now, and it's not only the matter of transparency code of or relationship between doctors and industry. And I can say very strongly that I'm not buying the argument that privacy is unimportant because I have nothing to hide. And I think you should also not buy this argument. Of course, everybody has many things that have to remain private. And then if privacy is to be reduced, for example, by transparency measures, it has to be for a very good reason, and it should be proportional measures that implement this reduction of privacy. So these measures should be also equitable. They should apply to everyone concerned, not only to one part. And in my opinion, this is one of the reasons, possibly main reason, why opinion of medical profession is split on this implementation of full transparency in relationship with medical industry. Of course, there may be many more reasons, but I'm afraid that Duan will not allow me to say it now. Hopefully there will be questions. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Romuald. Do you feel that the measures in disclosure as they've been proposed are proportional?
Well, if you ask me, Romuald, Krajewski, and
Which I just did, yes.
Yeah, okay, so then yes. But this is one of the situations where it is difficult to get consensus, and then if we speak about privacy, even there is a small minority who feel or can argue that their privacy is infringed by these regulations, we have to take into account, because this is an important thing. As I said, privacy is very important thing. And then, of course, there are many arguments, but well, if a discussion develops on this issue, we can I can say why the colleagues are really not a little bit, sometimes even afraid that this regulation is not really in line with proportionality measure.
But yet 2/3 of the doctors, even with that, agree that this in principle is a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it could be even more, because we've been working together with INFARMA, which is Polish branch of EFPIA and then or Polish member of EFPIA, and there is an information going on in medical literature. There are conferences. There is more and more talk, and it is more and more obvious that transparency measures are necessary. But still it is not 100%. I very much agree again with Bernard. I think we agree very often as professionals that we will never reach 100%.
Okay. So that's the medical practitioner view in Poland, who's in the process of implementation. Now let's hear the industry side, who's dealing with disclosure. So from INFARMA, this is the industry body based in Poland. This is Krzysztof Kałużny, who's going to discuss the efforts of INFARMA in Poland. Thank you very much, Krzysztof. Thank you for being here.
Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for inviting us here to this very, I think, very crucial discussion about disclosure and transparency. I want to tell you very briefly about what we have done in Poland to disseminate the message about disclosure code and this new transparency standards. Well, first of all, I should rather tell you that I represent here INFARMA, which is the union of 29 research-based pharmaceutical companies operating in Poland. And we are in charge of implementation of disclosure codes on the Polish market. First of all, I would like to tell you a little bit about the Polish context, just to avoid confusion further in the presentation. So when we are transposing the disclosure code in Poland, we thought that translating disclosure literally to Polish language would not be very fortunate. So we decided to rebrand a little bit disclosure code and call it transparency code, Kodeks Przejrzystości in Polish. We thought it was very important because this, in our opinion, underlines the major principle of the disclosure code, which is transparency and the reliable, available information about the cooperation between industry and physician. And disclosure is just a tool to achieve that. So I will use both these expressions, disclosure code and transparency code, but I'm talking about the same. So 2014 was very busy for us in respect to implementation of the code. We have set for ourselves basically two major goals: to disseminate, to communicate the code to, first of all, to physicians, to healthcare organizations in Poland, but also to major healthcare stakeholders like Ministry of Health or Data Protection Authority. And we are working a lot with scientific associations. Because we thought that it was really efficient and important to disseminate this information through the scientific associations. So we've been presenting this the code on scientific congresses, on meeting of the boards of the scientific associations. So we are really working a lot with scientific associations to really convince them about the code. We also focused a lot on media, mostly professional media addressed to physicians. All in all, we have counted around 50 different press publications that we that were published in professional media in Poland, and we also launched the website dedicated to the transparency code. And we hope to develop this website as a sort of a knowledge hub for physicians, but also for the general public, about the code, about the standards, about the compliance rules of the disclosure code. Also, we have done a lot to equip our companies to work in a harmonized way. So we develop a lot of different training materials for medical representatives, question and answers documents, and things like that, because we thought that it is really important that we really work together without any deviations. The plans for 2015 are also quite ambitious, I guess, because we still, of course, want to focus on the communication about the disclosure to physicians and healthcare organizations. That's the priority. But also we want to broaden the communication and not talking only about disclosure code, about the very rules of the code, but we want to speak more and educate more about values and standards of this collaboration. What is it really all about? And we also have planned many different, I guess, interesting initiatives to achieve that. But the one I'm really excited about, and I'm looking forward to it, is a debate which was going to happen on 18th of February that we managed to organize together, hand in hand, with the Regional Chamber of Physicians in Warsaw, which is the biggest regional chamber of physicians, associating around 30,000 physicians, and Professor Krajewski is a member. So we're really looking forward to this debate because we really think that it's going to be a very good point in all that public dialogue about the disclosure. So, of course, there are many benefits that we think we're going to achieve with the disclosure code. However, there are also a lot of challenges. The key benefits that we think we're going to achieve is that finally we're going to have a reliable source of information about subject and value of that collaboration, because we haven't had such a thing before. We didn't have, at least in Poland, we don't have a full picture embracing all the companies on this matter. We don't have any source of information that we know that from the perspective of individual companies, but we don't know in general. So it's really finally we're going to have the reliable source of information, and I think usually it is like that, not only in this our context of pharmaceutical industry, but also elsewhere, is that reliable source of information is a basic fundament of trust and confidence. So I think this is something we can build trust and confidence of patients and general public. And of course, I think this is also not to underestimate that with that disclosure standard, we're going to have harmonized standards within, in Europe. It's not going to be just the Polish standard or Dutch standard. It's going to be more or less the same rules in every European country. That's the benefits. These are the benefits, but of course there are a lot of challenges in that. I think in the coming months, or maybe in the coming years, we have to do a lot to support physicians and health organizations to comply with the disclosure standards, and this includes education, continuous communication, and dialogue about disclosure code. We have to work to increase the number of consents declared by HCPs. This is really critical, and I don't think we're going to have. I think I'm convinced actually that we're going to have step by step more consents every year, and once we're going to have the reports already published, I think the job is not going to be done. I think then we have to start to work to address all possible potential misunderstandings or confusions which this information could potentially generate. So it's going to be a continuous effort, and I think we're going to have quite a few years of busy times. So thank you.
Thank you, Krzysztof. There's about a zillion things I want to ask you, but I'm not going to do it.
Shoot.
How much time do we have? When you say reliable source of value, I'm just curious. Are you saying that for you at INFARMA, a lot of the support for the practitioners has been coming from outside of Poland, and you haven't had a view of what has actually been there? Is that what you're saying?
No, I wanted to say is that even from the INFARMA perspective, we don't have such a, reliable database, actually, how much the companies in total, in our entire group of our members are spending for that collaboration. It's maybe because we haven't done any research specific on that.
Or you haven't had a need?
We didn't have maybe, or we had different things to do.
Yeah.
But I think this is a good opportunity to finally get this information together in one place and start to talk about the facts and not about and to cut any speculation.
No, it's really interesting. We'll get back to you more, but thank you very much. I want to move on. So we've got Poland that's really in the process, the formulative process of making things happen. We've heard from the Dutch earlier who are up, running, it's in place, not without problems, but generally going well. And then we have right about halfway point, the Germans. So it's both in distance and in implementation. So we're very grateful to have Holger Diener from the regulation side of the pharmaceutical industry in Germany, and you're going to give us an overview of how things are going. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Johan, for inviting, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Well, it's up to you to decide where we are in Germany compared to the other countries. I think it's not up to me to decide that. A short introduction to the VSA. The VSA is the association in Germany controlling the code, implementing the code, and taking surveillance about the code. So we also have a sanction scheme and can impose fines to the member companies. That's the whole things we are doing in the VSA. And one of the major issues for the last 2.5 years, probably for the last 3 years, was the disclosure code, the discussions at EFPIA level, and then the national implementations. And we are quite in the middle of the process, I would say. So it's not the end, it's around 12 o'clock. Yeah, and we have 12 hours more of the day to fulfill in the upcoming years. Where we are, or what the situation in Germany is, in contrast to the Netherlands, we have a purely self-regulatory approach. Until now, it's only the VSA or the big part of the research-based international companies making this step forward. There is no law in place so far, and there's even no discussion at the moment in the government implementing a law. They may look at France and the developments in the Netherlands, or most probably to the Sunshine Act in the US, but there's no real voice coming up in the legislation saying that, well, we want to have something like this. So it's only the VSA companies going forward with this. It's some kind of interesting thing. It's somehow challenging, but it makes the initiative very interesting. And on the other hand, we heard it tomorrow, we have a strong data privacy law in Germany, which is probably most, or in the group of the strictest ones here in Europe. So we really need the consent for individual disclosure. And as a doctor or as a concerned person, as an HCP, you have quite far-going rights. If you have to opt in, and you can opt out at any time, before the first disclosure or after the first disclosure. So it's not. The issue is not to get the doctor convinced about opting in, it's also to keep him convinced, not to opt out, and probably this might be the same situation in all of the other countries. So it's a real process. And these are one of the questions that this might come up. We have a Q&A document now consisting of 26 or 27 questions, and there are really a lot of more. It's not a hurdle, just to be sure about that, it's an issue, and we have to address these issues with model consent clauses and all these other things, But you have the data privacy law, and we have really to respect the private information, and the disclosure of private information. Therefore, it's key and crucial to convince the doctor, and it's very good to hear the approaches of other countries, how to sell the story, how to make clear what the benefit of this initiative is, because we cannot, we don't have clear and sustainable facts about this. It's just a step forward what we are doing, and the only way to move forward is convincing the concerned parties. That's just to make sure that you all know, well, we have fully implemented the EFPIA disclosure code. We also have set up a dedicated website, also fully available in English, Pharmatransparency.eu. And there you can find a video all these informations you might see also in other countries, just to be prepared internally and externally, that everybody's aware what we are doing, why we're doing it, and how we are doing it. And this is pitfalls and opportunities. We heard a lot of things. First bullet point is patient organizations. Also, I think this was an issue this morning. With patient organizations, we started earlier. In 2009, we had the first disclosure in Germany of all cooperations between the industry and patient organizations. Beforehand, we had a discussion, or let me say the rumors in the public press that, well, there's a lot of cooperation. We don't know what they do. We don't know how much they pay. But there was some scrutiny that everything must be biased and somehow influencing the patient organizations. Therefore, at EFPIA level and later on at national level, we decided to have the code and a mandatory disclosure. And since then, since the companies first disclosed the lists with all the relevant figures, to whom they pay, what they are doing, and what the precise amount is, this criticism has gone away and never came back. Because everybody now can see what they do, why they do it, and that only reasonable amounts are being paid. And I think this is some of the good examples which you might, or which we can use at the end of the day to also sell the transparency code, because this is the point we want to go to. We want to get rid away of this unprofound, substantiated criticism by saying, well, we are proud of cooperating, yeah, this is what we are doing, these are the precise amounts we are paying, because I think a fair compensation is without any argumentation, and then we can discuss each individual case, but not can any longer have, or should not any longer have, this overall scrutiny going around about the cooperation between industry and doctors. And this is our scheme, or our mantra we use in the blue box, and it's quite the same as you do in Poland, where we say, well, we have to work together. We have clear standards, both sides, the doctors with their codes, the industry with their codes, and we are, and both are quite strict, yeah. And what we are now doing is the next step to open the books, to say that we cooperate and to which amounts and what we are doing exactly at the end of the day, because we are somehow in the same boat. Or someone said, well, we are not in the same boat. I say, well, okay, we are in different boats, but running in the same direction, nearly in the same direction. And the next thing is we have to do is to prepare the public, and this is somehow the learning from the US experience, that, well, there is cooperation and there are amounts to be paid from the industry, that are paid from the industry to the doctors, so that they know, and somehow when we see the first figures, yeah, that everybody is prepared, yeah, and that we explain why we work together. And I think both the doctors as well as the industry can be proud of the cooperation. And just to close with the official position, or the latest official position of the German Medical Association, it's a decision they took 2 years, nearly 1.5 years ago, saying, well, we are also in favor of transparency. We would rather have an initiative based on the US Physician Payment Sunshine Act, which turns out not to be the ideal one as you see now, but I think it's a clear decision. But we would rather have a law instead of a self-regulatory approach, which is a thing we can discuss. But it's also a clear statement coming from them that they are in favor of transparency. And this is, I think, a good basis on which we can build on. And I'm happy to answer your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Holger. How did you get from, I mean, it's interesting to me that you had the doctors saying, yes, we want regulation, and then you move to a self-regulation. I mean, we're seeing usually the opposite happening in Europe in the discussion. How did you get the doctors, or what was the mechanism which brought the doctors towards an agreement, into a self-regulatory system? How did that happen?
You mean in context of transparency? Or
Yes.
No, maybe this is a misunderstanding. There is no mechanism of self-regulation together with the Doctors Association. They took that decision separate from the industry at their yearly assembly, and at that time, they were not ready to cooperate with the industry, to have some kind, like in the Netherlands, some kind of co-regulation scheme where we move both together. So it's somehow a different approach at the moment, yeah. And the industry is heading a little bit the the initiative.
But you're able to manage aligned with the practitioners.
Yeah, we are somehow aligned, but I think it's really difficult to break down such a ruling, to the local associations, doctors' associations, and from them broke down to each individual self-employed doctor.
Mm-hmm.
That's a completely different story, and that's the great issues the companies now have, to sell the story from top to down and to have it to the ground and to convince each individual doctor to give his or her individual consent. Because I think I fully agree was said before. This is the thing we are looking for: individual information and not a very large bucket of aggregate figures.
Right. Which under the current regulation in Germany could actually occur.
I think in most of the countries, because you must. That's the only thing we can go for. So if you don't get the consent, you automatically fall into the aggregate bucket.
Yes.
So it's as far as we can go under the data privacy laws. It's at least something we can disclose as an industry, but I think everybody would be very happy if that is the very minority or the smaller bucket compared to the individual list, which should be thousands of pages long.
Okay. Again, we'll certainly touch more on this, but we've used your time. But thank you very much, Holger.
Thank you.
Appreciate that very much. Thank you. So finally, certainly not least, but last, Andy Powrie-Smith. Andy's recently joined EFPIA from the ABPI. So Andy's going to discuss what they're doing both at EFPIA and at the ABPI level to manage the process. Thank you, Andy.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm 3 weeks into the role, so I'm covered by the 3-week rule, okay, which means I can pretty much say whatever I want. Okay, so we'll be clear. This is my second visit to Rotterdam. The first one was on a 4-meter yacht that had lost its engine and was sailing into the port of Rotterdam. Any of you have seen the port of Rotterdam? That was quite an exciting experience. In a very small boat with very big super tankers. And I learnt some Dutch words that evening that I can't ask anyone to translate for me, I'm pretty sure. I found that very good training for starting at EFPIA, possibly. So I am definitely delighted to be here. So what I wanted to share this morning was just some perspectives, maybe a little from experience of managing this process and project in the UK, but also my very first impressions on what some of the issues are across Europe. And the first thing I did want to emphasize, I think, is just the importance of the relationship between industry and the clinicians and the health professionals that we work with. It is a driver of patient care, it's a driver of advancements in medicines, and it is critical to their future. And the second thing I wanted to recognise was the fantastic work that's been done by our member associations to bring this forward, and I'm very keen to understand how we can help to support you going forward. Okay. So I just wanted to say a little bit about the environmental context. It's a very often quoted figure, but 90% of the world's data has been created in the last couple of years. I think as an industry we're about to add to that figure, perhaps in some degree. But I think it is clear that we are living in a data-led world, that actually the societal expectation around transparency has certainly changed and increased. I spoke to my daughter this morning, who's 6. I said, "I'm in Rotterdam." She said, "I know, Dad." So that's quite impressive. She said, "I followed your phone on the iPad that's in the lounge." So I said, "Please don't teach your mum how to do that." But I'm very impressed with your IT skills. That's fantastic. We live in a social media world, and as I think Loda pointed out earlier, there is a new generation coming through that will post their romantic intentions online. They will post what they had for breakfast online. There is a different culture, I think, coming through society as a whole, but perhaps medical professions as well. And the move to greater transparency built on, I suppose, some pretty big issues that brought transparency to the fore, that rocked some of our confidence in what were formerly pretty trusted institutions, has led to this kind of global development of transparency, of which EFPIA is part, and of which the national associations and members of EFPIA are part too. So, that said, I think we are all aware that various, or all of us, feel at different points on that hill, on our respective skateboards, I think, and that there are certainly challenges ahead, both from an industry perspective, but this must make no sense to you guys in this row at all. Sorry. There's challenges from an industry side. How do we get a level of consistency? Do we use the same taxonomy? How do we get very big organizations and big financial systems to be able to integrate and deliver the data that's needed and required by the code and so on? And we certainly recognize from my interactions with healthcare professionals that there is quite a journey to go. This is new. There is concern about the impact and how this will impact not only on them individually, but also on the public perception of health professionals as a whole. A number of the speakers have mentioned this inherent tension, I suppose, a little bit between transparency and privacy. And I have my own views, and I'm certainly not a legal expert on this, but it is something that we've discussed in lots of different fora. And I think the first thing to highlight is the risks of non-disclosure. Because I think certainly from a health professional side, we saw that in conversations with health professional organisations as a potential major risk to the credibility and the reputation of the health professional side. If we are delivering a project, and say I go back to my UK experience, and that aggregate figure that's just been mentioned is a substantial figure, then that is not going to reflect well on either side, and there is significant risk attached to that, and how we address it over the next 18 months is going to be of critical importance. This was explained, I suppose, by our legal colleague far better than I could. But I think there is a kind of spectrum around managing consent here, with, in very simple terms, and the least resource intensive and creates the least risk overall, is this public interest argument. Because companies don't have to invest huge sums in managing that process and all the contractual things that probably make the legal community very sad. Because it would be simple and a lot less sort of contractual work involved. But as we move down that scale to where we've got a very kind of individual contract by contract written consent approach, we see an increase in complexity and resource and time that's involved in delivering that. And I think we really need to think about where we are on that spectrum, both in terms of the reputation and the integrity of the project as a whole, but also in the investment, the time, resource, and so on that all of us on both sides of the equation have to put in. So, how do we approach it? So, I think we need a change in culture, perhaps, over time. I think if we're here in 4 years still arguing about the best ways of grabbing consent and how does that work, then we've probably lost some of the battle. So I live way up on the west coast of Scotland, and there are two things that are quite popular where I live. I live in the middle of nowhere. So one is tractors, and the other one is whiskey. Okay, bear with me. So the result of those two things being popular is often this, right? It used to be, or at least 20 years ago, that happened to be the case. But actually, you can see how changes happened 20 years ago, and now this just doesn't happen. To the generation that have come through, there's no understanding that one may have gone down this route in previous years. Over time, this became not the way to do things. And I think transparency, there is an element of something similar. That as we attend congresses in the next 2 and 5 and 10 years, and actually we know who's disclosed and who's not disclosed, those numbers will shrink. Because culturally, this will, over time, if we look at the direction of travel over the last 5 years and what's likely to be over the next 10 years, it is hopefully going to become the professionally accepted norm, both for industry and the health professional community. And how do we achieve that? Well, I think some of it's about leadership. I think we need leaders in the industry to stand up and say, this is, the direction of travel, and this is why, and what the rationale is, and be able to have those conversations with stakeholders and with the health professional community. And we need leaders, and we have some of them here today within the health professional community, again, prepared to talk through concerns, discuss those issues, and then talk to colleagues and with colleagues about what they are. And I think the other area for me is that if we, when it comes to disclosure, as a health professional and an industry, describe our relationship in completely different ways, that's going to cause issues. Actually, we have this relationship, and if we are able to collaborate in how we communicate about that relationship, what its impact is on patients, why it exists, all of these points, then that done collaboratively will be a lot more powerful and a lot less risky. I'm getting the nod. Again, 3-week rule. So a few other things. The Mind the Gap, I think we've seen there's going to be huge differences between country, between company, and so on. So we need to think about why those exist. How do we explain them? There may be very valid reasons, but I think as people look across Europe, we need to understand that picture. For those of you who can't read that says, I jumped through a window screen to chase a cow. And again, bear with me, it's from my favourite website where owners put up the misdemeanours of their dogs. Okay? Now, the reason I have it there is, my understanding is, even though it's been declared online, the cow doesn't feel any better. Okay, so where I'm going with this is, I think over time, what we need to do, as well as transparency, is understand the context within those disclosures are made. We need to be sure and confident that our relationships, the way that we work together, the way that we work with people, are fit for purpose, not just now, but going forward. And I know that companies and member associations are continually re-examining that and evolving that relationship. Okay, from an EFPIA perspective, I understand that actually one of the areas that we really want to move forward is, how do we support you as companies, you as member associations, you as health professional organisations in talking about this issue and engaging with people on this issue. And that's our aim, or certainly my aim in coming into this new role. So I think we can create some resources, we can disseminate the great work that we've seen with some stuff from Germany, from Poland, there's stuff there from LEM in France, there's stuff from the ABPI, we can do all of that. But I think actually talking to people is of paramount importance, and our aim this year is to really be out at congresses and different events, meeting people. If you want us to come and meet people on your behalf or with you, please come and grab me afterwards, after lunch, and we'd be really happy and keen to do that. So I will finish there because Dwayne's quite big and quite close. But thank you for your time. The thing I'd say to finish with is that I don't think transparency is any comment on the issues of the past. I think transparency is about preparing this important relationship for now and for the next 10 years, and that's what's critical about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy. So we've heard from Andy in sort of part presentation, part religious revival. Thank you, Andy. One thing I'd like to ask the panel before we pass it over to the floor. ABPI, I think, is close to the Dutch in the implementation. I think the Poles, you're just getting started. In Germany, you're somewhere, you're getting in place, you're building the relationships. How, from each of your perspectives, what do you think is one or the two key things you need to do to be where the Dutch are in a year or two? What would you need to happen? What do you see as a key to making that delivery occur?
Well, thank you, and I think this depends a little bit on perspective, but if I'm to speak about from the perspective of those doctors who see a value in transparency, because it's evident that not all see this value, and for a reason I don't want to discredit them, because this is just different perspective. Okay, speaking on behalf of majority, I think that the most important thing is just start doing this, and it's already going on. And usually it turns out that in practice these things are much less terrible than they were supposed to be when it was discussed theoretically. And this is, I think, the lesson from Netherlands, where initially there was this peak of interest and it was so fascinating, and then it became kind of routine for public and for doctors. So one thing that will certainly help is experience, and I'm very much convinced that the experience will be positive with time. So, and then of course this is the matter of discussing this again and again, and then even most skeptical doctors and other colleagues and other professionals say, okay, well, let's stop discussing, let's do it, because how long can we discuss? So I think that's what we do, and we hope that very soon we will have very good level of acceptance. It should remain voluntary, and you asked what I would mean a proportional measure. I think one of the conditions to consider this proportional is voluntariness, because
Sure.
if it becomes law, then it's completely different story.
Christoph.
So if I think about two major factors which have to be accomplished to achieve that or be there where Netherlands are right now, I would say it's education or dialogue and time. So I pretty much agree with that, what this professor said, because this is the way, at least how we look at this problem in pharma, is that we want to make it a sort of a good custom, and to make a good custom that everyone follows, you need dialogue, education. You need to convince. You need to talk to people, and you need time for that. So I think I don't know. Maybe the first year of disclosure, it will be not extremely successful in terms of number of consents, but I'm sure that year by year it will improve, and the number of consents will increase, as people will, as physicians, as a health organization, will see that actually this thing is not so scary actually as it appeared as it seemed at the beginning.
Holger.
Well, to start with, I think we have to say that we are not in the Nordic countries. It was mentioned earlier this day. They have a complete different culture of transparency. There you can call the tax authorities and ask about your neighbor's income for the last year, the salary, and you get a verbal response, and you get the figures. That's not the situation which we have in Germany right now, and we are the only one going for disclosure to that extent, starting from the first year. So we are the front runners in this process. Therefore, I think there's the need to explain this, and we will probably need some more time, to contribute to the threats and of the doctors, being blamed for earning that much money by the patients or by the press, or for being at least in contact with the industry. And I think that's a process, and we have to go on. And I think the farther we go and the better we are at the end of the day, the more doctors will join in. But it's really a process, very interesting, but it's probably, because we are a larger country, a thing that needs some more time. But I'm quite confident that we will be successful at the end of the day.
Good. And Andy.
So I agree with everything my colleagues on the panel said. Probably three things for me. So one is dialogue, as someone's already mentioned, and I think being able to put these numbers in context about what they are, about what the impact is for patients, is going to be critical. Leadership, as I've said, I think is very important. There's a degree of stepping up. So if every survey I see says 86% or 80% is in favour of transparency, now 86% maybe
favour of disclosure of payments of their colleagues' payments, maybe, or I don't know. But, you know, you've got such strong support in these surveys, so we need that voice to be replicated in medical media, in, you know, in congresses and so on. And I also, the last thing is I would ban one phrase, and that's, I believe in transparency, but. Okay, if we could avoid that, then we may have less issues. But yeah, I think dialogue and leadership would be the two
Great.
main ones.
Thank you. Opening the floor for the last 15 minutes. Questions? Yes, sir. Please state your name and who you're representing, please. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. Or is it still morning? Or maybe it's the...
It's afternoon.
It's
It's legit. It's almost lunchtime. Almost lunchtime.
My name is Elias Okwara, and I work for Health Market Science. And I had a question, and this is something I was talking to Anne about. What happens the day after that consent issue has been addressed? Because we all know that data privacy is more than just getting the consent. You have all these rules about processing the data, you know, the mechanisms you have to put in place to ensure that that data is secured in the entire processing life cycle. And so I wonder to what extent are, you know, member associations in EFPIA, individual pharma companies, how are you seeing this issue being addressed? And is it being taken as seriously as a consent question?
So you're talking about the whole value chain, the process implementation. Folks, Krzysztof, how are you dealing with that?
So I'm not sure if I understood the question properly, but once the consent will be taken in advance, so at the very beginning of the collaboration with a physician, and it will be valid until it will be revoked. So.
But I think he's talking about like the IT systems, the process, the implementation. Is that correct? Yes. So it's all the back office parts of that. Where is that managed? Are you handling that?
No. This is not handled by INFARMA. This is handled by each individual member company, and also the reports and the data will be published on individual websites of the companies. It will not be a centralized register like it is in Netherlands.
Right, and each country can do that slightly differently. So Holger, and then Andy, I'll get to you too. How are
No,
you?
it's the same in Germany. We somehow handle the front end and the back end. So we say what should be inside, and what should be collected as data, and then it's up to the companies to develop their internal systems based on their individual needs, resources, and all these things. And what I learned during the process, it's a complete different situation, between the companies. You can neither say that the bigger ones are better prepared for the process compared to the smaller ones, and vice versa. So each company must find its doable solution, to also to track the cross-border transfers of value, and therefore we only give the requirements, the framework at the beginning, and we will check at the end if the template is filled out in the correct form and all the relevant informations are in. But between these two lines in time, it's up to each individual company to set up their process and also to agree and to safeguard that everything is done within the data privacy framework and issues.
Thank you. And Andy, how do you?
Hi, Elias. So in general, I think there are two approaches looking across Europe. So you'll always have the position where the company is the data controller, but you may, where a country is creating a central platform for disclosure, also have a sort of dual data controller position. So you'll have company plus the host organization of the central platform. So that relationship needs to be managed, and they both need to be. But I mean, my experience in general is pharma companies are pretty good at managing data. There's loads of challenges. They're big organizations, and they don't always, find routes to talk to each other. As we know, that's just life in big organizations. So yeah, there are challenges, but they're not unsurmountable.
Question, yes. Microphone's coming. So again, please state your name and the organization.
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Ashley Santner. I'm the Director of Legal Compliance for EFPIA countries for CIGIDIM, and I just want to thank you for the presentation. My question is for the associations and also EFPIA. Do you anticipate that the national associations may amend their codes once publication has occurred in 2016?
Mend the code. You going to change the code, Krzysztof?
Excuse
You
me?
going to change the code?
No, well,
Andy's standing right there, so.
no, definitely. I mean, we have basically we have adopted the code and transposed it into the Polish version already into 2013, and this was agreed by all the companies. So this has been decided and approved at the very beginning of the process, and it's not gonna. It's not going to change.
So it's not going to change.
It's not going to change, and we have already also the approval from Andy and EFPIA that we're fully compliant with.
Okay. Holger, any changes for the German market specifically?
Not so far, but I think it's some kind of the trustful working of a self-regulatory body that you, from time to time, look at your codes, make an assessment, and look what worked and what did not, and then you may amend or change the code. And I think since this is a completely new one, maybe we will come in the next upcoming 2 years to the point where we say, well, we have to make some adjustments, or some amendments to the code, but now we have the code, and the companies have to follow it. And I think before we see the first disclosure, it's very unlikely that we will change the rules, within the game, but afterwards, I think there will be some kind of, review phase, and I wouldn't say that we will come out at the end of the day with some minor changes to it.
Okay. Romuald, are you satisfied as a practitioner with the code? Is there any recommendation for changes that you'd like, or do you think it works in the context of your discussions with Krzysztof?
Well, in my opinion, and from European UMS perspective, it is a good thing that this is single code and that it will not be very much changed locally, because then we can get very different products. So I would certainly support this from practitioner's point of view. I think I will use this opportunity to say something that, in my opinion, is important, because we say now, okay, well, 80% of doctors support, maybe some 70% will sign, okay, but then doctors ask, okay, what about pharmaceutical companies? What is the percentage of pharmaceutical companies that subscribe to this code? And I think the situation is very similar, so we have some kind of symmetry here, but it would not be good if we expected that 100 pharmaceutical companies per 100% will join, and then on the other side that 100% of doctors will join. This is this kind of initiative.
And Andy, at ABPI, I think you're a little early in EFPIA to sort of, but what about your ABPI experience on compliance from the industry side?
Yeah, so codes as a rule don't stand still. That's the nature of them. And if you were to read the ABPI code of 50 years ago, it is very different now. In fact, there was a misprint in a program that described Heather Simmons, the director of the PMCPA that looks after the code in the UK, as the oldest and strictest. I think they meant the code rather than Heather herself. So you've seen a huge evolution. But I think one thing I would say about the disclosure code coming in is it's been, that's significant transformational, dramatic change, and those are far less often. So, what you see over time is I think is kind of evolution rather than revolution, but some sort of step changes, which this has been, and I wouldn't envisage that they are too regular. But codes move and evolve as they should do, because they need to sort of reflect the expectations of society and the world around you.
And what about Romuald's question about compliance, industry compliance, and ABPI?
Yeah, so forgive me, I'm not a code expert in terms of EFPIA or perhaps ABPI, but certainly in terms of the representation of the pharmaceutical industry in the UK, the code covered both ABPI members and non-members that complied with the ABPI code, and that covered like 99% of companies that make medicines that are delivered in the UK. So it's an incredibly big or comprehensive coverage there.
Thank you. Another question. Anyone from the audience? Talked out. Okay. So some countries are I'll then take privilege here, moderator privilege. Hope you don't mind. Some countries have opted for regulation. Some countries haven't. What do you think, what would be the decider in Poland if it needs to go down a regulatory route? Are you going to absolutely try to avoid that? What do you think in Poland are the keys to keep this a self-regulated process?
Well, frankly, we don't know, because let's face it, all this activity is very strongly stimulated by political needs, by economic problems within healthcare, and it is seen as a way to reduce healthcare expenditure and so on and so on. And I pointed out that this is contradictory, there are contradictory tendencies, but anyway, politics very much drive what is happening there regarding at least regulations. Our position as physicians on European level and also in Poland will be that self-regulation is the way to go, and we always stress professional autonomy. There may be other countries that are not that sure, and if I got it correctly, German doctors beg for being regulated by government. This is very far from our ideal in Poland, and I think as far as I know from European perspective, in majority of countries. Then there is British tendency, very well known, to regulate everything, and okay, this is a kind of approach that is maybe justified by the culture in UK, but again, as doctors in Poland and as UMS, for example, we will always stress that voluntary approach, self-regulation, is what should continue, because there is some kind of fallacy in believing that administrative regulation would solve all the problems, although this is sometimes appealing fallacy, and we see that it is going on, but we strongly oppose this tendency.
So yeah, as Professor said, we don't know if this kind of regulation will be introduced in Poland, but of course we have to take into consideration that the global trends, show us that there is a high probability that something, a regulation like maybe in France or US will at some point of time will also be introduced in Poland. There is such a chance, and so we want to simply get prepared for that, for this kind of event, and we want to use this time simply to establish this good custom that I was talking before, and simply. If there will be such an idea to introduce this kind of regulation in Poland, we will be simply prepared, and we will have the ready-to-go solution to offer to the authorities to introduce this on our rules and on our standards that we have developed within this time, and not simply imposed rules created by authorities.
Sure. Again, questions from the floor? Anyone? Yes, one back there.
I already introduced myself, Bogi Ferencik from Amgen. I have a question in an interesting topic. It just came up recently. So the French Competition Authority announced an opinion that actually individual disclosure is against competition, so it would block or stop or burden, let's say, the free competition in the pharmaceutical industry. So how do you feel? Is it something like a beginning of a big wave which could flow through all EFPIA countries, and let's say would create difficulty in the EFPIA countries with individual disclosure, or even a showstopper?
We'll go with Andy first.
So no, I think it's related to the specifics of the law in France. So obviously, forgive my rather veneer of legal knowledge here, but bear with me, right? So my understanding is that the law in France includes that you need to disclose the details of what's involved in a particular contract, as well as then if you add in the financial element, you would be able to identify a unit price for a particular piece of activity, which would have competition implications. If you look at the EFPIA code as a whole, and in other situations across Europe, there isn't that requirement to disclose that level of detail in terms of the activity. So therefore, if you were saying, well, you know, we paid Dr. X £1,000 for, or €1,000 for advisory boards from the period of January 1st to the 31st of December, then you can't identify, you know, that could be one ad board, it could be 50, you can't identify how much someone was paid, and it takes away the anti-competition law. So my understanding is that it relates to the specifics of the French law, including, you know, the requirement to disclose all the details of the content of that contract.
Holger.
I can add to that from a legal perspective. What we did with the code, with the German code, which is fully compliant with the EFPIA code, we brought it to the Bundeskartellamt, which is the German competent authority for competition law. And as the competition law is, I think, fully harmonized all across Europe, we always take our codes to the authority to be checked, before we put them into place, before they can become effective. And they had any comment on this. So the code was fully approved without any kind of, comment or additional things we have to do. So I think that's it's an indicator for the whole of Europe that the FPR approach, as well as our national approach, is fully in line with the competition law, and adding to that the French situation is somewhat unique for the French, for France, and cannot be, ruled out for the whole situation in Europe.
Okay. We're at lunchtime, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank all of you for being here today. I'd also like to extend a round of applause to the panel for their excellent work. Thank you very much. So please, feel free to have lunch. Thank you for coming. We will get video and materials out as soon as possible. And with that, we conclude the session. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.